front if you'd like to move up. My name's Lisa Hitchens. I'm the superintendent of schools here in Batavia, and I know there's a lot of members from the core team related to this project, so thank you for coming, and staff members as well, but also a very special welcome to the community members who are giving up of their Thursday night to lend your voice to this process. So thank you very much. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to DLR Group. There's 4 representatives from DLR Group here today who will be facilitating this workshop tonight. So welcome to DLR.
Thank you, Dr. Hitchens. Hello, everyone. I'm Carrie Van Sant. I'm an architect and project manager with DLR Group, and I'm going to have my team introduce themselves as well.
Hi, I'm Bonnie Sanborn. I'm an environmental psychologist, which means I'm a psychologist for buildings. I study learning and working, and I'm DLR Group's design research leader.
And I'm Sarah Guyette. I'm an architect and planner. I'm also a leader in the K-12 group. And we can't forget Dennis Bain, who is our team member in the back, helping people shuffle in and get seated too. So just a little bit about DLR Group, because I'm sure you're wondering who we are. We are a global architecture, interiors, planning, and engineering firm. We really have the philosophy of integrated design. You can see Bonnie has a unique background. We also have assistant superintendents and teachers in our staff. And our biggest sector that we work on is actually K-12 schools. So this is really in our wheelhouse. We love being in schools. We love seeing kids succeed. And we also know that your district is different from your neighboring districts. You have unique community needs. You have different students. And therefore, not one size fits all. So even though we're a really big firm, we bring this all expertise to you, we want to create solutions that are going to work best for you and your community. And I think the best part about it is we bring the research and design element to the work that we do. Like I said, Bonnie, she leads up our research and design group. So if there are questions along the way that you're wanting to ask about where does the research point to, we can provide that as well. So that's a little bit about us. We want to know about you. So if you were able to get onto the Wi-Fi, if you could go to menti.com, we're curious about who you are, whether you're a community member, staff person, and we'd like to know how long it's been since you graduated high school.
I am working to get the screen up for you. I apologize. But if you go to menti.com and enter the code 411301, that will take you into the first poll.
Oh, there it is.
There's my problem.
It just went away though.
I know it's extended, not mirrored, so I'll fix it.
Could you repeat that?
The code is 411301.
There we go.
Oh, I'm doing this backwards. All right.
That's hard when you fit into multiple groups too. Okay.
We will leave this up and going so we can actually have the full pie chart of who's here tonight. Ooh,
Awesome.
lots of parents. Thank you for coming. Everybody.
I know that number is off, though.
And I know we have one student, but he's running our video camera. We will catch a couple other people, but we also asked you.
And we're not tracking this down
No,
to
we're not
see
gonna
who
keep this.
answered what, so don't feel like.
Yeah, we won't know who you are.
I had to think about it too.
There is a reason we're asking. Other than curiosity.
All right. So today's agenda, we will go over the educational master facility plan, the plan process. So an overview of the plan, how we got here. The district will explain a little bit more to how we got to where we are right now. And then we'll talk about the process and the goals of the master plan.
The screen is it's up. The screen is here.
And then we'll talk about roles and responsibilities of different stakeholders in the community and within the district, and those helping guide the master planning process. We'll talk about Foundation for Success, and we'll be doing some activities and asking you some interactive questions on menti.com again throughout to get your feedback. Talking about preparing students for success and talking about change, various student pathways that students will take once they leave Batavia 101. Talking about different activities that are happening in the classroom today and where we're starting to see maybe the future go with those activities and how they're done within the classroom into the future. And we'll talk a little bit about what's happening outside of Batavia, both in other more regional locations as well as outside in a larger picture. And then we'll do an activity at the end to capture your voice in a headlines activity for what the district might look like in the future. To start us off, Tony with the district is going to give us a little summary of how we got to where we are today, with starting with the educational master facility planning process.
Yeah, so this isn't the first time we've done this, actually, depending on how you count. This is probably the 8th or the 9th time that Batavia has convened either a commission or a committee to look at our facilities and develop a long-range master plan. And the first one that we at least have records for and can track started in the mid-1980s with the first Facilities Commission. And that plan wasn't written in stone, it was revised with a series of successive commissions that came together and ultimately culminated with the additions of Batavia High School that were finished in 2009, 2010. But after that, the plan was done. And there was another couple of groups that formed, and I'll talk about one here in just a moment, but one looked in specifically at the athletic facilities at Batavia High School, but was only related to that. But really, at this point, we don't have much of a long-term facilities plan. And as best as I can tell, and I haven't done formal research on this, past that referendum, I think it was 2007 that put the additions on Batavia High School, and here we are in 2019, some years later. And by the time, if we were to ever pass another referendum or do major construction, and that's not necessarily the goal of this process by any means, but if we were to undertake major construction as a result of this plan, the longest period will have passed since the early 1950s that we haven't either had put an addition on a school, remodeled a school, or built a new school, which is quite a long time. We know that some of our schools, in particular H.C. Storm School and Louise White School, were built in the late 70s, and they're over 40 years old. They're wonderful schools, but they haven't much changed since. And we know that they were built for school back then. School yesterday isn't school today, and it certainly isn't school tomorrow. And so we want to make sure that these facilities serve our children's needs, and their needs are changing. We ask, when you graduated from high school, because it's a lot different. Even in the last 5 years, it's a lot different than what it was 20, let alone 40 years ago when many of these schools were originally conceived and constructed. So we've got the work cut out ahead of us. The next slide shows you what some of the work did of the most recent facilities committee. And we got together and over a period of a year worked on putting together a series of recommendations that primarily focused on safety and some programming needs and other deficiencies that we felt didn't quite meet the community standards. And that helped us really get together and kind of start looking for architects. But when we started looking for architects and we started working with DLR Group, they said we need to take a step back and make sure that we're getting things done in the right order. For example, a number of our schools, especially older elementary schools, don't have secure vestibules, entrances to the schools. Things were much different back when these schools were originally constructed. And it isn't too difficult to bolt on a security vestibule on a school, relatively speaking, but in many cases, a lot of other aspects of the school might need to change. In many cases, traffic around the school is much different now than it was, and we literally might have to move parking lots. So it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to put a security vestibule on the front of the building when the parking lot might actually move. And that might be a long-term plan that we might not necessarily get to in year 1 through 5, but it might be something that we do in year 10. But unless we have a long-range plan, we could be throwing good money at it. So we want to make sure that we do that. And that's really the objective here of this plan is long-range plan, we can piece these things together and do things in ways that make sense. Much like we have a history of doing in this town. This will be the 8th or 9th committee or commission to do so. So we have a long history of it. And with DLR's assistance and expert assistance, I might add, it was quite impressive as to what we're undertaking with their professional guidance. We're well on our way.
Thank you, Tony. And I just want to add on to, so this was the facility committee report or list of projects that came out were presented in October of 2018 from the volunteer committee that worked on it for about a year. One thing I want to point out, and which goes to another reason why we're looking at an educational master facility plan, is this particular statement right here. Elementary science spaces were not included in the conditions assessment because they do not exist. So I think that's an important thing to note. Those are program pieces that the district is interested in incorporating, but they can't assess them currently because they don't exist and there aren't spaces for them. And that goes into helping define that educational vision today and where it's going in the future for Batavia 101, and making sure we have the right spaces for those programs. This is a quote often attributed to John Dewey. If we teach today's students as we taught yesterday's, we rob them of tomorrow. And I think this is really important as we go into the planning process to kind of take a step back and think about where we were in school and the things we were doing, but then consider all the things that are changing today and into the future and what our children today will be faced with when they graduate Batavia 101. So I kind of hinted on it previously, but traditional master facility plans are really taking a look at the bricks and mortar of your schools. How systems are functioning, what the life is on those systems when they might need to replace, when you need to do finish upgrades to flooring or ceiling tiles or lighting upgrades, depending on the age of the equipment as they age out. Educational master facility plans take it a step further. We're taking a look at the adequacy today of your educational facilities, and then also looking at educational readiness. So we want to make sure we're meeting Batavia 101's educational vision so that you can see that lasting value in your facilities and with your programs as they develop. Our goal is to make sure we're aligning the spaces to the programs. We, as Sarah had mentioned, this is not a one-size-fits-all. We do not like to design or plan for spaces where we're saying, let's take that program and just shove it in a box. We want to make sure we're designing those spaces around the program so that they can be taught most effectively. So the process for the Educational Master Facility Plan. How many of you know we're in phase 2? Okay, I'm glad to see that. Phase 1 was done earlier this year. We actually had a share out of our findings. It was in May. This is what we call a deeper understanding. So it's really DLR Group's opportunity to get in and understand the facilities and what's happening educationally in the classrooms at every level. You can find out more, and the district actually has a pretty elaborate description and breakdown of each of the phases on their website. Everything attributed with the master planning process has either this logo up at the top left or a Building Our Future Together logo. It's the same thing, but in anything that's got that language on it, know that that's with the master facility planning process, okay? You can go back and take a look if you need a refresher of phase 1. We did a recording of that share out of all of our findings, which included everything from indoor environmental quality measurements, surveying, classroom shadowing, teacher activity logging. There was a number of things done, and there are also dashboard handouts for each school that shows all of that, a summary of all of that information that we gathered. So right now we're in phase 2. This is really our opportunity to discover and explore. What does that mean? It means how is a district growing in programs or maybe even enrollment? And a separate study is also being done in that regard. But really, what is possible? What is out there and happening in education, and how does a district want to deliver it? Then we go into phase 3, which is programming. And for those that aren't familiar with the term in architectural sense, programming is where we, DLR Group, work with the administrative leadership team to come up with a list of spaces. So we find out what's currently happening, we learn where we might want to go, and then we develop a space program. So a list of spaces, which could be anything from classrooms to small group spaces to labs to lecture areas, what have you. We do create that space, we understand how many are needed, we understand the sizes of them, and adjacencies. Adjacencies are very important when you're planning space out. And then we look for gaps from where your existing buildings are to where all of these program pieces should be or need to be included. And then we start going into conceptualizing and looking at options for how do we get there. At that point, and you'll see towards the end, we'll give a summary of this again to show when we'll have additional community sessions, but the core team, the stakeholder group that's helping to guide this, will help develop these options. We'll do share outs, gain feedback, refine those options and concepts, and share out again. So those are points, just if you continue to follow along with this process, where you can come and find out more and weigh in. So I talked a little bit about the stakeholder groups. We have the community, the greater community, and all of you, are parts of the community. You share different cast of stakeholders if you're parents or teachers or administrators. We also have the Board of Education. We have a few members here tonight that are really the decision makers. So this core team of individuals, which will help, which has been formed and will help guide the master planning process and help guide some of the decisions made, with the leadership and expertise of the administrative leadership team, which is Dr. Hitchens and her leadership team, her cabinet members, if you will. They will help guide the planning process. And the core team is built with teachers, administrators, community members, including parents and non-parents. So if you want to get your voice out or get some feedback to them so that they can bring it to us, that is the way to do it, is to help funnel information through core team members. Primary users are our teachers, our students, our administrators, those that are using the spaces that we're talking about. So, building from what your district does well and looking at challenges is kind of the next set we'll go through. Really, to understand where we want to go, we need to know where we're at, right? And if you don't already know, the district does have a strategic plan in place and goals, and these are posted up on the district website. So please make sure you read them, you understand them, and note that these are really the framework to building the master planning process as well. We want to make sure we're meeting the strategic plan goals along the way. The district also has 3 core strategies as they approach, with their approach to learning, from personal learning to quality staff and collaboration, and aligning curriculum, instruction, and assessment. And you'll find out a little bit more here on this video.
At BPS 101, we measure success in several ways, including academic indicators, the growing number of opportunities that we have for students and staff, our national recognitions, as well as surveys of students which tell us that they feel safe, they feel connected, and they feel supported. While we're very proud of these continued successes, we know that none of it happens by chance. We invest our energy into 3 core strategies so that all students receive a high-quality education, take ownership of their learning, and are prepared for what's next. In short, we are ensuring all students are always learning, always growing. Our 3 core strategies were shaped and continue to be shaped by BPS 101 teachers, administrators, and the Board of Education. Staff members are committed to them because not only did they help shape the strategies, they have been proven to work, and they are the drivers of our future success. However, it's not enough to say we are always learning, always growing. We have to say how we are doing that. The how is our 3 core strategies. If we're not all headed in the same direction, and if we don't have a common understanding of where we'd like to take our students, it's impossible to get there. This is where our first core strategy comes in. With an aligned curriculum, instruction, and assessment system, BPS 101 teachers at each grade level and subject area have clarity about what students need to learn. They know what it means when students have mastered a concept, lesson, unit, or school year. This clarity comes from staff working in collaborative teams to write standards-based curriculum and develop instructional frameworks delivered using research-based strategies. This ensures that all of our teachers understand the skills, knowledge, and disposition students need to reach that standard. Through formative and summative assessments, staff monitors student progress and the effectiveness of the curriculum. The end goal of this important strategy is a guaranteed and viable curriculum where every student is provided an equal opportunity to learn. Our second core strategy is quality staff and collaboration. The biggest factor in student success is a quality teacher who has confidence in his or her ability to produce a desired result, otherwise known as efficacy. We believe the best way for our teachers to impact students and their learning is for the staff to be assembled in their schools in collaborative teams within a professional learning community framework. The collaborative team structure is the primary strategy that BPS 101 utilizes for continuous improvement of our teaching staff. BPS 101 also supports teacher development through the use of instructional coaches and instructional technologists who provide job-embedded support and learning for individual teachers and teacher teams. Additionally, BPS 101 has district-level collaborative teams comprised of multiple stakeholders who work together to make systematic decisions. Simply stated, staff collaboration is a lifestyle at BPS 101. Our third core strategy is personalized learning. The concept of personalized learning puts students at the center of teaching and learning and actively engages them in the process. Instead of expecting students to fit the mold or adapt to structures that may not be successful for them, BPS 101 has committed to personalizing learning to meet the needs of all students and encourage students to take ownership of their own success. In Batavia, we define personalized learning as students and teachers working together to tailor learning to strengths, needs, and interests, including opportunities for student voice and choice in what, how, when, and where they learn, to provide flexibility and supports to empower students in their pursuit of excellence. Through this process, students make learning visible by engaging in goal setting, reflection, progress monitoring, and a feedback loop to make educated decisions about their own learning paths. It's important to note that clarity is key with this strategy as well. Students can't design their own experiences if teachers aren't clear on the standards-based curriculum. Clarity really does start with the standards. At the end of the day, student learning is our ultimate goal. exploit our key strategies and get better at them. They are the foundation of our future success.
On 3 core strategies for the district if you didn't know about them. You can also find out more on the website eps101.net and as with the other videos related to the district that we'll show tonight. So as part of the phase 2 process, we met with various groups. So we met with the leadership team and we did what are called curriculum and instruction workshops with the different teacher groups, so elementary, middle, and high school levels. Through that process, we went through an exercise to identify, it's sort of a SWOT analysis, if you will, but identify what are current strengths and opportunities, challenges, and concerns within the district. So if you're looking at this, it's kind of hard to distinguish, but the blue is when we met with the leadership team, and the CNI attributes to the gray, so kind of see how those came out, and where we found some overlap is some of the terminology you see in yellow. So it might be kind of hard to see, but some strengths identified by both groups include technology integration and blended learning. And you'll see a little bit more about that as we go through the presentation. Also, both groups hit on that these identified strengths up here, so technology integration, social emotional learning, business and community partnerships, dual crediting, and authenticity, learning by doing. Those strengths are constantly being built upon. Just because they may have made some achievement in those particular categories, it doesn't mean that they're done or that they've gotten to the best point that they should be at. So, and those have also, some of those were also identified by some of the teachers as challenges that they're working through. So, then there's concerns about making sure there's some stabilization with class sizes and space types. And also key to it, and we've heard it through a number of groups, is having the accessibility to all spaces and all programs. So preparing students for success and what they will need to do to follow their pathways. I'm going to hand it over to Bonnie, and she's going to talk to you about it.
So, as some of you answered previously on the Menti, it's been a while since some of us graduated high school. And the kids who are coming up through Batavia today, who are starting in maybe 1st, 2nd, 3rd grade right now, are a part of a generation that is pretty different than when we were all their age. And they're called Gen Alpha. They're what comes next, what comes after millennials. They also happen to be the future of all of us, which is a fantastic opportunity for teachers to be able to help shape them and help equip them with the skills that will let them navigate that future. The reason we talk about generational differences is not that their brains are different or that their bodies are different. We're all human beings. We all have the same bodies. But some of the values that they pick up as they grow up in this new world are different than ours. And we kind of like to keep them in mind when we plan. This is very hard to read, but we will make sure that there is a downloadable version available on the website. We're looking at the spread here from the builders to the boomers to the Gen Xers, Gen Y and Gen Z, into Gen Alpha, and some of the things that really set them apart. I will read them to you because I know this is very hard to read. So some of the things we're looking at are, what are the devices they're used to using? Are they analog and they require a lot of interaction? No, they're over here at this point where I have an Alexa in my house. It drives me crazy. It's weird to have a speaker talk back to you. Some people are growing up with that as a native part of their everyday life. We can talk to our phones, we can talk to our speakers, and they'll just respond right back to us. Maybe not always accurately, but there's an interaction there that wasn't there when I was a kid. Another thing that we see is the things people are looking for in a leadership style and an ideal leader, which definitely ties into learning and also working. Looking at the past where we wanted leaders who were directive, who were commanding, who inspired confidence because they had a lot of authority and they were in charge. Younger generations are looking for people who are going to empower and inspire them, who are going to co-create things with them and collaborate, so while they might be in charge, they're also giving their team members a say. And that's a really different style of learning, working from a directive leader. We also are seeing more life stages. We realize now that we don't just go from childhood to being a teenager to being an adult and then boom, we're done. There are a lot more stages that all of us go through. So we've got childhood, but we've also got tweens. Some people take longer in young adulthood to find themselves. And my favorite new acronym that I learned from this infographic is KIPPERS. No cheating if you've already heard this, but does anybody know what this stands for? So this is kids in parents' pockets eroding retirement savings. Just a little recognition that after 2008, some of us needed to regroup, and our family unit may have come back together for a while. And that really changes the life for all the people in the household. Then we're looking at a lot more career mobility. As you can see down here, on average now, people will have 18 jobs in their lifetime. They may even have 6 different career paths, so things that are recognizably different careers. And they may live in as many as 15 homes. That is a lot more change than I was used to, and certainly my parents were used to. And the other thing we're seeing is we are living longer, healthier lives. We want to be productive. People turn 65, 67, and 70. They may not want to retire. A lot of people have passion careers and encore careers that as they start down aging, they have the time and the resources and the skills to do that second life. And that's something we really want to prepare people for by helping them be lifelong learners. 85% of the jobs that will exist in 2030 probably haven't been invented yet. This comes from a report that the Institute for the Future did with Dell Technologies a few years ago. My job certainly did not exist when I was in elementary school. I'm really happy with my job, and I'm glad that I had the skills to navigate the pathway to get here. So, thinking back over your life and your career, how many of you have experienced change after graduation? Just raise your hand. Seems reasonable. Seems almost weird to ask at this point if any of you have experienced change in your life after graduation. But that change is getting faster, partly enabled by technology, global connectivity. The best skill that we can give people is the ability to keep learning and keep adapting to change so that when it comes, they're ready for it, they can get new skills, they can embrace it. The ability to gain new knowledge will be more valuable than the knowledge itself. Maybe equally in my opinion. So one of the things we like to talk about is this recognition that students are on many different pathways. You heard it in the video, Carrie's already referenced it. We want to make sure that when we are looking at creating spaces for teaching and learning, we're creating spaces that are going to meet each kind of student and the path they might be on. It's going to give them that authentic experience for where they're headed. Some of them may be headed into higher education. Some of them may be headed straight into a career, and these are just some of the awesome jobs that people can get right here in the Batavia region. There's a real richness here of places people can go work. All of these jobs also require continuing education and professional development. So we went through an exercise during those curriculum and instruction workshops, which we held with elementary school and early childhood teachers, middle school teachers, high school teachers, and also one of the coolest groups of 5th through 12th graders I've ever had the pleasure of interacting with. And we made some future student personas. When we design, we like to make personas and give them as much detail as possible so we can empathize with that imaginary person and try to create something that is going to make them happy, help them meet their needs, help them get through their day. So we have 3 different pathways that we ask people to do some group work around. One was that student heading straight to college or university. They know when they graduate, the next step for them is an institution of higher education. We had one who happened to be ready for it academically, but socially and emotionally, he was very nervous. On the flip side, we had a student persona who was very driven to succeed, but needed some help making choices and motivating themselves. Students starting straight in the workforce. We had a lot of recognition that there are people who love living in Batavia and want to keep living here after graduation. So one of our imaginary students is going straight into his family's business. Another person was graduating with a certification, happened to be in hairdressing. She wanted to study that right in high school and go right to work as well. Then we had some students on unique paths. There are things we can't imagine, and so we asked the teachers at Batavia, where do you see your students heading that maybe doesn't fit these first two? We had a very realistic inspiration, a student here in Batavia who graduated and now runs a bad axe throwing business where you can go learn to throw axes. So we have some student entrepreneurs. After graduation, they're going to try starting their own business or be a freelancer like a graphic designer, maybe a consultant of some kind. And then we had a couple students who are really just looking to find themselves. They're going to go into AmeriCorps or Design for America, Teach for America, and they're going to take that gap year to figure out what it is they want to do and maybe earn some college tuition along the way. So, again, time for a Menti. Maybe it'll go a little more smoothly this time. We would like to hear from you again. There will be a new code at the top of the screen. I can just escape out of this and make it work.
761718.
So which of these pathways do you most identify with? Where were you headed? I was a gap year kid.
I went straight to college. I was thinking of going straight to college, but kind of. You get that code one.
Oh, sorry. Sure. I also really if I wasn't wearing my contacts, I would be able to read it. Big chunk of people headed straight to college or university. I'm curious, straw poll, those of you with kids, do you see them also heading straight to college or university? Or maybe raise your hand if you think you might have a career kid or a gap year kid on your hands. Undecided. Gap year is a nice way of saying I was undecided. So, I'm getting the hang of this. Once we had those student personas, we wanted to talk to the teachers, as the experts in teaching and learning in Batavia. We wanted to ask them, how do you want to prepare these kids? If you know where they're headed and you have this detailed imaginary person on your hands, how do you feel you need to teach them? What kinds of spaces, what kinds of activities would best support this person you've created? So as Carrie said, we started out in phase one by looking at the activities that were already happening and the spaces in which they were happening. We shadowed students at every school. 6 of us came down throughout the spring and shadowed awesome students. 25 students, or in the case of the very young ones, classes, were followed to see and observe the kinds of activities they were doing. We also did morning and evening listening tours with teachers. So we sat and listened to anything that they needed to share with us about what was or was not working in their space, maybe anything that was helping them or preventing them from delivering teaching the way they wanted to. We also got 49 awesome teachers to participate in recording all of their activities over the course of a week, and through this we formed some snapshots of the average student day by grade level that particular week in Batavia.
Students take ownership over their own learning. This is not about teaching, this is about learning. And one of the core things that we're doing is using blended learning within our classrooms. Now this isn't something new. Blended learning has been taking place in our classrooms for many years. You'll see this when teachers are meeting with small groups of students in a reading group. This is nothing new for our classrooms. Well, what's really changed is that technology has allowed us to really leverage the learning that takes place in the classroom and personalize it for our students. In this video, you're going to see students engaging with technology, but more importantly, their teacher. Because technology is not a solution in itself, but it allows us to leverage the systems that we have in order to make learning more personalized for our students. This puts students at the center of that learning environment.
A lot of the time and making decisions for what they want to learn, which is causing the engagement to be exciting for me. I'm not standing in front of the classroom anymore just for long periods of time with all these eyeballs looking at me with little sponges. It seems like they're more apt to be learning something with me individually or in a small group, and there's just a lot more collaboration, which is just allowed for just kind of a renewed excitement for me as a teacher.
I like working in stations because then we get to have different options of what we want to do, and I like deciding what I like to do.
We decided to incorporate blended learning into our classroom because we saw a need to reach learners at so many different levels, and especially with the focus more going towards the growth mindset and goal setting. We wanted to make sure if you teach one lesson to the whole class, you're reaching just those kids right in the middle. And we wanted to make sure that we could reach kids in small group that may be below what is the first grade curriculum. And then also those kids who already have mastered the first grade curriculum, we want to make sure we look at where they're at and take them to the next step. And then not only what are we doing in our small group, but we wanted to look at, well, what are kids doing when they're not with us then? And we want to make sure they're not just biding their time waiting to come and see the teacher, but that they're doing meaningful practice and that they have some accountability and some choice in how they can work towards their goals when they're not with the teacher.
The students are really reacting to the blended learning model. I think they're higher level engagement. I'm seeing more collaboration with each other, more excitement for generating new topics. So they might be learning something in math that they are sharing out with the class, and then another student might be like, I'm going to learn that. Can you coach me along with what you're doing? And they'll post little challenges for each other about what they're doing with technology programs like Front Row or IXL, and I'm at level of this, or have you tried learning this? I can teach you how to do it. And that's been exciting for me. It's no longer just, I'm doing only the second grade standards, but we're pushing the envelope into higher levels of standards too for them.
Of using blended learning this year because really the student ownership part spoke to me the most. We've already been doing goal setting in the classroom, but what I found was the students were doing the work because I asked them to do the work. They were doing the learning because I asked them to do the learning, and so much of it revolved around me, and ultimately it's not about me at all, and it's about the student ownership and the students owning their learning. And that's what I love the most about the blended learning model is the student ownership, and they're setting their own goals, they're tracking their own progress, and monitoring their own learning, and it comes down to they're learning because they want to.
So until I had learned about it myself, I was a doubter. And then I'm crazy that they need the structure, they need to be told how to get things done. Once I learned more about blended learning, saw it in action, I realized maybe learning how it's done is going to help them more than me telling them how it's done.
I think in a lot of my older classes that didn't use this, I would get bored if it was an easy subject, and with this I can control the pace, which is really nice. And Like, even if I am racing through a subject, there's other people that aren't, that can always go back and get more teacher time than they would if we didn't use blended learning.
I've always noticed that my students, my highest students, always were finishing things really quickly and then would kind of sit and wait, and my lowest students would struggle to finish at all, or they would just kind of give up on a question. So I thought this was a good opportunity for my students to be at their own pace but end up at the same spot with additional help. I feel like I interact with my students on a much more personal level, and I'm able to help them a lot more because of the fact that I'm not trying to help 30 of them at once. It's only between 1 and even 5 at once. We're mostly a data-driven district. I have noticed that our test scores for my students have increased in comparison to other semesters, which is awesome, I think. And otherwise, the collaboration between students, it's been really fun to see when they're working in their groups together. I would think in the past when they would have immediately ran to me to get help or to ask something, but it's been really cool to see them going to each other and even to other groups going, hey, did you get this technology function to work? Can you help me out? And they explain it, and then it's just been really cool to see the responsibility level in them. Really, their ownership of this learning is really just taking charge.
There's a wonderful, relaxed atmosphere to the class that I haven't seen in a long time, especially with my honors students. Oftentimes, your honors groups are kind of high-strung folk, and the kids are often very pressured, and and I'm not seeing that with this group. So that might be the success, is that they are being successful without the pressure that they kind of put on themselves. And that's got to be a good thing.
All right. So if you look at these videos with our eyeballs, not only are you very excited that teachers are happy and feel like this is working for them and that the kids feel like it's working for them, but you are glued to the tennis ball on the foot of the table in the elementary school classroom. Did anybody notice that? So this is the kind of thing we're looking at. When we hear that teaching and learning is going well, and we see maybe the room looks a little wonky compared to it, that's where we get dialed in that this is something we can help support through space. We see tennis balls on the foot of tables because people want to move them and put those stations together, but the tables are really hard to move and really noisy, and the tennis ball mutes the sound that it makes on the linoleum. It's a classic thing that we see in schools, and we want to fix it. We want to help change that so that the room works better for the teacher. We sometimes see teachers maybe in postures to work with little kids that aren't great for teacher backs. We want to help that through space. We also want to help make sure that the technology flows between rooms and through the school so that the whole space can be an environment that supports that teaching and learning that's working for people. When we observe students and ask teachers to log activities and ask teachers to imagine future teaching and learning, we use this list of learning activities. The reason we break the activities up into this category set is for 2 reasons. One is cognitively, our brains are doing something different when we are, say, listening to direct instruction than when we are engaging in group discussion. Our brains are working differently. Sometimes our bodies are working differently too. We may need to be, for direct instruction, we may need to be sure we can hear and see the teacher and see the presentation. For group discussion, we want to make sure we can hear our group mates and that we're not so noisy that we're causing distraction to somebody somewhere else. So it has some mental and some physical implications. It's also what we can see students doing. It's also what teachers can ask students to do. I cannot teleport myself inside a student's mind and know if they're enjoying the lesson or how engaged and on task they are, but I can tell that they're meant to be doing hands-on learning right now, and that's what we need to support through the design of the space. So those are the 2 reasons we break it up this way. We let the teachers look at those snapshots from the observations in the activity logs, and we ask them, if this is a snapshot of a day in the life for early childhood with a lot of time spent in hands-on learning in group, which makes total sense for little kids, and everybody's staying in one room, is this what we want the pie chart to look like in the future? I'll go through these quickly, and you can hear a full breakdown in that Phase 1 report out, which was recorded on the district's website. As we move into kindergarten, kids are getting the chance to practice more freedom, using their creative skills, sometimes taking some tests. And again, they're staying mostly in one space because they're little, the structure helps, that's kind of their home base. Moving up through elementary school, we're starting to see kids are moving between spaces more. They're also getting a more well-rounded day. A lot of the pie charts from the Batavia schools are very kind of balanced across these activities. There's a lot of time spent in housekeeping for little kids, getting the coats on, getting the coats off, getting the snacks out, getting the worksheets out. And middle school, again, moving through even more spaces. And on into high school, where we're doing a lot more physical activity, study and testing, presenting and performing. Through all of these, we're also keeping track of what we call practicing agency, giving students those choices about what they work on, how they work on it, and at what pace, and where, which is the space part of the conversation. So after digesting the snapshot of right now, we asked teachers to look at those future students they'd created and take these cards, which are the same activities on the list, and make a new learning map. So if you could support this student with the learning activities that were going to help them get further along that path, how would you carve up the day? Just by percent of time, not by minutes, because maybe the learning day is a different length in the future. We also had some blank cards so they could write in their own, stuff for housekeeping and transitioning between spaces, because that's the reality of going to school is we have to move around. We need some time to do it. And we got some really cool maps out of it. These are from the elementary school students. The student that this particular map relates to is one of those gap year kids. Her name is Mary. She's very independent and self-motivated, but she has a really hard time in that group classroom setting because she kind of wants to learn everything at once and in her own way. So the teachers gave her this direct instruction up front where she gets information about what she's supposed to be doing. What's your task right now? And then she launches into this big chunk of time where she can brainstorm, research, discuss with other people, and come back at the end of the day to present it and get some of that recess time in. So her pie chart looks like this, with a lot of physical activity time, group discussion, choice. Not actually that different from the elementary pie chart right now. Then we had Stuart, one of our middle school students. He really loves living in Batavia and plans to work here after graduation at his family's business. He is a hands-on guy. He likes making things, which there's a large chunk of hands-on learning in his day. And he really, really likes sports and local events. He wants the learning to make sense to him, and if it doesn't make sense, he kind of gets bored. So he needs to understand how it's relevant to him. He does really well in personalized learning assignments because he feels that they're relevant. So the teachers here made a cycle for Stuart. He starts again with that direct instruction and the directions that he needs about what he's supposed to be doing, and then launches in to this iterative cycle, which looks really familiar to us designers, of trying things out, presenting, getting feedback, and relaunching into the project. And then at the end of the day, he transitions out. Then we had Shane, who's a high schooler. He is the one who is headed to college after graduation, but very nervous about anything where he thinks he might fail. He's kind of a perfectionist. He really likes collaborative study groups, group projects, working with other people, and uses a lot of technology for his projects. He also does a lot of service clubs and tutoring, which is part of how he gives back to his community. So Shane has these kind of 2 tracks that he's on depending on which type of assignment he's doing. Again, he's getting a lot of directions up front and then launching into this practicing agency. A huge chunk of his day is spent deciding which thing he needs to be doing to get his tasks done. So there's a really strong theme from these maps we're seeing from teachers of that upfront guidance and support, and then really shifting some responsibility to the student around how they're going to get that work done and share it out. We also got to talk to students, and they had some very cool activities as well. There's a little video of, they actually drew all of their students for us, so we will make sure that that's on the district website. Some incredible artists in the community. But again, we saw a lot of learning cycles and project-based cycles. This aligns a lot with something that we find through our research work. We partner with what's called the ILETC, or the Innovative Learning Environments and Teacher Change Network. This is an initiative actually out of the Australian government. About 15 years ago now, Australia, for some natural reasons, had to rebuild a large number of their schools, and they asked themselves the very intelligent question, if we're going to invest this much money in our schools, how will we know if it's working? So this research network, which we participate in, has been going for many years to create tools and distribute research on how we tell if learning environments are working for people. And they're looking not only at those different activities and the groups that they happen in, but also the spaces that they happen in. From all the way from these little floor plans, which represent rooms along the corridor, what we would think of as a more traditional school space in the US, all the way to these very open plan learning spaces. And there's a mixture in between of more common space. These red dotted lines represent flexible mobile partitions. And then they actually went into schools to find out what sort of spaces they had to see how well they were working. For the student learning, how well the students were achieving academically, and the teacher mind frames. How much did the teachers feel that they were engaged in the lesson and able to meet those student needs? It's actually not, it's actually not that most open one that helped people. It was a certain amount of openness with the ability to close off as needed. This is echoed in a lot of schools that we see, whereas Carrie hinted at when she talked about programming, it's the layout of those spaces that matters and the ability to get to the one that you need relatively quickly so you can keep right on learning. There's a full report available, and there will be linked in the presentation if you want to read the reports. It's great stuff. So we have another Menti for you. We try to keep you awake.
And feel free to stand up. So
Yeah.
if you're standing in these, or sitting in these very comfortable seats, around.
All right. So we asked teachers, we asked students, we've asked the admin team, we've asked the core team, what word, and you can enter more than one word if you want to keep hitting refresh and entering, what word describes a future ideal learning space or activity to you? And we will start seeing them pop up here. You see a word you like, you can put it in tune, it'll make it bigger on the screen. I think there's also a way to upload it. Mix here from the conceptual to the practical. Well ventilated is very important. We actually use our offices as living labs, and as part of the master planning process installed monitors in each of the schools, which we do at all of the schools and actually a lot of our different project sites. So you can hear in phase one because we actually want to see how well ventilated the spaces are. I'm seeing light and bright. People who put in comfortable are willing to clarify. I'm curious if you mean physically or sort of socially and emotionally, or both. Physically comfortable?
But now that you say emotionally comfortable, of course I'm.
We hear it a lot, and I always like to know because I think they're both really important. You were in the comfy chair. Awesome. You can keep putting things into the Menti throughout the evening if you have another one pop into your head. It looks like flexibility, collaboration, safety, hands-on, comfortable are all big themes. Accessible, accessible and inclusive, words we like to see. So we're getting to the end of the curriculum and instruction workshops. We put people through a lot of activities. The next part, there we go, is the context. So we use this activity with our workplace clients, with our higher ed clients, and especially our K-12 clients, because all of this teaching and learning, all these spaces, they're part of the culture of the district. We want to understand where that is and what's important about it, and also where it can go, that possibility in the future. And we do another activity about it called Cultural Continuum, and now I apologize, this is the least fun chart to look at in this entire presentation, so bear with me. We put up giant posters on the wall and have people add dots, starting with the yellow, starting with the blue as the present. So blue is where we are now, and we ask people put up dots where you think the district culture falls on these different spectrums. The left side isn't good, the right side isn't bad. These are just opposing pairs of words like static to flexible, open to closed, informal to formal. Obviously, they can represent very concrete aspects of space, or maybe just the culture and the feeling in general. So the teachers made this graphic combined, and we want to pay attention to these big arrows, right? These are big shifts that people envision making, and we can help support that shift through changing space, since space is a huge symbol of our culture and what we value. But it's just as important to look at these short arrows. These represent things that culturally exist and teachers feel they're working well, and we don't want to move them too far. They're kind of an anchor point. So keeping that balance between open and closed and formal and informal, and recognizing that in Batavia it's important that the two coexist. Now we also asked the students the same thing. And we got these pink and green arrows. I won't make you look too much in depth at this, other than you can see that similarities along a lot of the arrows, except if you look at the very bottom here, group achievement to individual achievement and owned to shared, the teachers and the students are headed in opposite directions. This is something we want to dig into more. This is an interesting response to get from people. Now, the teachers may be reflecting mostly their own experience and desires. They would like to share more, and they would like to do more as a group, whereas the students are saying, personally, me in my learning career, I would like to have some individual achievement, have some ownership. And in that case, those two can really coexist. But maybe not. Maybe when we talk, we'll find out everybody's talking about students, and we need to achieve some understanding about why these arrows are headed in two different directions. This is something we can continue to explore in phase 2 and with the core team. I will turn it over to Sarah to talk about our next activity. There we go.
So as Bonnie said, we did a lot of activities with the educators, the students, but we also asked them what defines success. So looking at 10, 15 years out, what will you see, feel, and how will you participate in a district that's changed in 15 years? Oh, wrong way. So successful if is what we called it. And this is the student response. And much like you just saw the word cloud generate with the words that were entered more frequently, we did the same with them. And they were looking for personalization, choices, being motivated, taking ownership. That was just mentioned in one of the arrows going in the opposite way as well that we need to dig into. Proud, flexibility. The educators and teachers. Commenting collaboration, flexibility again, retention. And it doesn't mean that you're not doing it now. It's just, that's an important thing to keep doing in the future. Students, obviously we heard a lot about students are the reason they're there. Their success is the educator's success. So we expect that to be large. But class size, support, other things that keep wrapping into what we can start to look at how space might support them in the future. And then the community. We asked not only students, but also educators, what do you think the community will look and feel like and respond to if this master plan is successful in 10 to 15 years? But they were looking for connection, a pride in the school district, being able to have a common service, being called global citizens, having that reputation. and actually the schools being an extension of the community being an extension of the schools. So, what does success look like to you in 10 to 15 years? What are going to be the key things that define how this plan will be successful?
team member, his very first word was fun. He said, keep this at the top of the poster. It's really important to me, which is neat because one of our 12 values is also fun. And I like it when people are interested in fun. We just got a lot of response about happy students, inspired students, joy. It's really nice to see. As with all the others, you can keep pouring words in here while we carry on.
All right. So when we talk about education in space, we talk about educational adequacy. And so as I mentioned earlier, it's really taking a look at the adequacy of your spaces today to be able to support the education you're trying to deliver. But we also look into the future and look at educational readiness. So how are your spaces going to be able to flex, to change, to meet the needs of the students in the future? When we talk about readiness in space, we divide it into a number of tiers here, tiers 1 through 4. And I'll go through and explain those to you, but each one gets a little bit more flexible and immersive and technologically oriented, if you will. So starting with the first one, tier 1 is really what we call evolved traditional. So I'm sure a number of you have grown up and gone through schools that are what are called traditional classrooms, with classrooms along the corridor, and you sat and got your information from the teacher in rows and desks. Like this. Evolved Traditional is a little bit more than that. We see multiple teaching surfaces, so we see multiple screens, we see multiple areas to write on, we see the ability to really do a number of different learning activities in small group spaces. So a lot of your teachers are using those traditional classrooms, but they're using, providing small groups and different interactive stations to allow for a number of learning activities to occur at one time. A big thing with Evolved Traditional is furniture. Furniture to be able to flex and change the spaces around, to be able to do things at a moment's notice, change up the activities, get the students involved and get them physically active in between activities to keep those juices flowing in their brains. And then also taking a look at how spaces might be subdivided. It's really also allowing students to start to take more ownership of their space. And here are some examples. This is more of a high school level, sometimes even a middle school level, but you'll see here what I'm talking about with the multiple surfaces to be able to see presentations and interact in small groups, put their comments and feedbacks and group thinking up on various areas to write and take notes and present out. And you see here too where this particular space is a larger group space, but it's been being sectioned off to be used as a small group activity. The teacher is not the sage on the stage, if you will, in front, disseminating information to the students, but she's in the middle and she's interacting with the students all around her. Tier 2 is what we call differentiation, and I've got some examples in the video too that will show. But this is really where we get into spaces where that promote more collaboration, both in and outside of the classroom. So this collaboration is more student-teacher, student-to-student, and even teacher-to-teacher. We see more mixed cohorts, so we see where fifth graders might be assisting fourth graders, or fifth graders might be mentoring kindergartners. Fluid space. So as we go into some of these images, and we start to see some spaces that might not be completely contained, start to open up, but transparency starts to become key to allow students and teachers the ability to see what's going on. It provides intrigue to students, seeing what their fellow students are working on and saying, hey, maybe I want to try that out. But it also allows a teacher to be able to stand in one particular area of this large open space and see what's happening and monitor students. You'll see in this particular area, we've got students in this back area collaborating up in front, all in small groups. We've got some self-guided study and some pairs. So this particular space is really affording these students to be able to do a number of those activities that Bob was talking about.
I'll also interject too. So this school is, I think, a favorite of a lot of us. And one of the things about architectural photos is that the photographer comes in and stages it and takes down all the posters and wipes all the stuff off the writable whiteboard walls and the windows. The last time we took someone through this school on a tour, the kids had actually drawn on the entire window a map of the world, and they were using stickers to kind of populate for the project. Unfortunately, that's not what looks good in architectural magazines, so the photo tends to not show some of the actual activity the kids are engaged in.
And to that, though, that also goes to where this is really a shared space. We get away from teacher-owned spaces, right? So a classroom you don't go to in the morning and say, this is mine, I'm here all day long, but it could shift. It could be another teacher, another class as you go throughout the day. This is in plan, so I know plans are sometimes difficult for people to read, but in plan, this is the layout in yellow around kind of traditional classrooms, and the way that this was initially designed was to be able to leap toward the future and eventually slowly grow into this model of more and more flexibility and transition, be able to use these spaces in different ways. So while we have science labs, they can then open up into a greater, larger group spaces that can then be sectioned off into multiple different activities, different zones, but still afford the opportunity to see what's going on and monitor. This is an interesting photo because if you can't tell, there's actually 3 separate spaces in this particular photo. Clear at the back, we've got a little bit more of an enclosed, contained classroom space where they're doing focused math study work. And that allows the teacher to keep them engaged and keep them focused, but it also allows other teachers in that particular grade level or section to be able to have their students out while they're in the classroom if they need to do some of their own paced activity and paced learning. These guys in the foreground are separated here by the students on the other side by a glass partition. So there is a little bit of containment to that space. But they're able to sit and do their own study on their devices while others are doing paired activities or small group activities.
For the folks who said light bright, we do have some skylights coming in. This is actually a renovation, so were we designing it from the ground up, it might look different.
Yeah, so this whole very traditional 50s school was essentially completely gutted and renovated, portions of the roof lifted up to allow light into the space and really transform an existing condition that they had that was not meeting their needs. And these are just some additional images to show how that particular space can be used and zoned in different aspects. This is a photo of more of what you would call traditional circulation or spaces outside of common areas, such as the library, which is in this space is back here. And in the foreground, so where the photographer is standing, is their cafeteria or commons. So this gives them additional places to sit and be able to do work. And this really doesn't look much different than some of these workplace spaces that we're starting to see and work and use. Dickinson Middle School is, I think we have a video on this one. Is this next one? Yeah. So this is Dickinson Middle School in North Dakota. This is a new building, but this starts to go a hinge between the Tier 2 differentiation to what we call Tier 3 as plurality. But it's really allowing these spaces to work differently and open and close and divide spaces off and use them for different things. And the video is going to explain it much better than I do, so I'm going to let you watch it because it's a little bit of insight.
This seems to go.
Sorry about that. That smart technology went to sleep on us because
Maybe that says something we should dance. Maybe we should. Still moving it up.
That is created closest to the problem is the most effective. And I think this school allows teachers to solve a lot of their problems that they might have had in a traditional setting and create a better learning environment. People improve by learning, by educating. All the greatest changes in the world have come through education. I think that a classroom environment or a learning environment has 2 factors, abiotic and biotic. So abiotic are the living parts, right? The students and the teachers. Those abiotic factors, which this school has created a learning environment very conducive to different types of learning. I think those abiotic factors that we pay attention to, or the DLR, the architects helped us pay attention to, really have provided an environment that allow our teachers to use multiple different tools. So whether it's project-based learning, or whether it's inquiry-based learning, or collaborative learning, or really direct instruction. These spaces are unique. We have not only fixed solid walls, which are designed for multiple teaching surfaces inside a single space, but we also have things that shift or move intentionally. So we have walls that fold
and slide. We have doors that actually sleeve through other walls. They're marker boards, so they're these activity spaces that can support a small group or even a larger group, and they change positions.
The research behind and the input from stakeholders, not only teachers, but other staff members and parents, helped us create a building that does allow us to change education. It supports teachers and the work they're doing right now and encourages them to look beyond what they're currently doing for possible even better ways of educating and learning.
This discovery space is really cool. It's if you just want to go out and not be in your classroom. I see a lot of my friends because you can see the whole 6th grade from here.
There's so many different aspects of the school that meet different beliefs. Another example could be we have a designated space where teachers meet during PLC and team time. Our walls move in and out, so there's multiple configurations classrooms can be set up into, allowing teachers to personalize learning, allowing teams of teachers to integrate learning.
When we did schools traditionally, we would think of them as these static things that would never change. We would have 4 walls and a door. We would have an opportunity to turn the lights on or off if we were going to show a movie or a video. But today, we think about space and we really talk about place and creating this integration between community and architecture.
The most important thing I could say about how the design assists in student learning is the way that we're able to utilize space. When I'm planning my lessons or planning activities, I can think about how kids can spread out in different areas of my classroom and the discovery area that I can use, how to move my walls in order to section my classroom off, having small groups instead of one large group. So I think really utilizing the space in my planning has been probably the biggest change.
This school helps teachers do their job better. This school helps parents do their job better. This space allows us to meet the needs of different learners. It's flexible enough to adapt to changes in education, changes in our community, changes in the world. Kids expect more. I mean, when they come here and they see the way the building looks and they see the opportunities they have in the classroom for different ways of instruction or different ways of learning, I think they think, hey, I like learning this way. I like collaborating with my neighbor. I like building projects. I like problem solving. I like that I don't get the answer, that teachers challenge me to find the answer myself. I think that in the future, not only changes kids' expectations as they go down the line, so 9, 10, 11, 12, and post-secondary, but it also prepares learners for a changing world.
Schools are really about place. It's about creating the background for those memories, those learning memories that the students will have. And so while it's important for us to create good architecture to facilitate that, the ultimate success in my mind is that sense of belonging.
One of the important things about both Jordan and Dickinson is, obviously we're master planning. We're not designing buildings right now. We're laying out a pathway to get to those spaces that are going to meet program needs. But sometimes it's helpful to see what's already happening in other parts of the world. And the thing about Dickinson that I particularly like is one of their cultural values was when they walk in the door, they wanted it to look familiar to people. So all of those movable spaces that you saw are actually behind the scenes. When you walk into the school, there's a corridor, there's classrooms, it looks familiar to parents, and all of that flexibility happens on the other side of the door next to the windows so that it's not in the center of the space, which is kind of the opposite of the school before it. So just kind of making sure that we've got that culture right.
All right, so, and I mentioned before that that school was hinging kind of on tier 2 and tier 3, but as we go into tier 3, what we call plurality, it's really building upon that second tier. We're talking about adjacent and specific spaces. So one space might not work without the adjacent spaces to be able to function appropriately. And having those adjacencies, those breakout spaces or those focus spaces adjacent to one another really will help make that particular place or space seen when it comes to education and students learning. We talk about more full campus access and even off-campus access. So learning anytime, anywhere, your technology, you're untethered, and that's a term that we've been hearing a lot lately. But yeah, pull the plug, not being tethered in, being able to take your device and learn wherever you're comfortable or wherever you learn best. Sometimes we have so much going on, we just need to get into that quiet place to reset and refocus, and making sure that we have those spaces for those reset is just as important as having spaces to learn in group sessions and learning classroom settings. And we also talk about starting to integrate with community and business partners. And an example of that is Canyon View High School.
So I'll walk you all through Canyon View. Now this is a high school, and some of the things we're showing work well at the high school level. But all of the things that we're talking about here came out of the vision for teaching and learning in this district and creating a building that supported it. So you'll notice it's in Arizona. It's in Woodell, Arizona. Arizona is a very hot state, but one of the important things for this particular school is they wanted students to be able to get outdoors as often as possible. They also wanted those flexible shared teaching spaces, so teachers were collaborating, delivering lessons together, and students were collaborating and mixing together, so the right group came together to do the activity that met their needs that day. Again, a little floor plan fun. The green spaces, as you can see, each one has a door to this hallway. And then we've got some blue spaces in between that are sort of more the common spaces. They've got soft seating, they've got couches and tables, whereas the green has a little more of what we recognize as classroom stuff. Now, this is called a fort. They decided they didn't want to call it a classroom because it wasn't one room. They wanted to have it be a set of spaces together and be a little fort, like a fun place you would go hang out with your friends and have a blanket roof. You keep your eyes on the blue and green. All of these spaces are joined together by movable walls. The walls actually hinge back and forth. So the doors stay in the same place, but depending on the day, you may be walking into a very different configuration inside. Now the kids have an app. They have technology that tells them if I'm having English with Miss Smith today, this is the door I'm headed to. And when they get there, the room will be set up the way that it needs to be for that lesson. Might be really different depending on the kind of lesson or project they're doing. This is sort of what it looks like in action. This is a rendering. So we've got some kids who don't look like high schoolers. You can now go see this video online as well. You can see pictures of the school online that are not renderings. But really allowing, again, the space to flow. Sometimes visibility, sometimes not visibility between the spaces. And making sure that large groups can come together as well as small. Another thing I'll say about this, because safety comes up a lot in schools, and we did see safe as a goal for a lot of this. When we see transparency, sometimes the fear is too much transparency and safety don't go hand in hand. There's a couple of things that I'll just share as a part of global perspectives. One is on the research side, there's a field called crime prevention through environmental design. We actually talk about the ability to see as one of the biggest factors of safety. To be able to see far and know what's happening in the building, and the fact that people coming in know they can be seen by other people. There's someone out there who is probably seeing what they're doing. The other thing we talk about is making sure that this is a space that is welcoming and inclusive for students, so we do not have problems to begin with, that students feel that they're a part of this community. Department of Homeland Security did us the favor of touring this building and doing a safety assessment. They also talked to students, said this was one of the safest schools they visited because not only could you see and control the environment that way, but the students expressed to them, we feel good when we come here because we feel like we belong. We really like being at school. And that's really, really key to building a culture that's safe from the ground up. And then we get to some of the really far out there stuff in Tier 4.
Right, so this Tier 4 is what we call immersive. And think about a space that starts to ignite the senses. And one particular setting, you could go into your classroom space and learn about the environment and say the Alps, for instance. We can control temperature, we can control smell, we can control sound. All of those senses are ignited. And then you can walk into and change that environment to an undersea adventure. Now, are these happening all over the place? No. Are they happening in every space? No. But I think the important thing that we're trying to bring to you is that there's a variety of things that are happening out there, and what is the best mix of those types of spaces? Is it a blend of all of those spaces? Is it really taking a look at, would this make sense strategically for certain programs? Or is that way out there and it's not necessary and we're able to partner with business partnerships that might be doing certain things like this already? I mean, look at our office, for example. For us to be able to convey designs to clients, we bring them in and give them virtual reality goggles and let them walk through spaces. So it's not that far off. It's sometimes really difficult for clients to tangibly understand what a floor plan is and what a space might look like unless they see three-dimensional renderings or have the ability to actually walk through them and see what's going on. So a blend of a number of different spaces that meets the needs of Batavia 101 is where we're going. We're not saying any one of these is the best, but maybe a mix of some of them is where you want to be.
And the last video we'll leave you with before we head into our most interactive activity of the evening is again looking at tech-based, fully immersive, and in this case, fully untethered. So we're playing you a video from a very real university student at a very real university. The university is called Minerva. If anybody heard of it? If you are in the CNI workshops, you've already watched this video. So Minerva is a 4-year accredited university where students go and get very traditional degrees from real professors. It happens to have no campus whatsoever. Minerva moves cities around the world every semester. The students are together as a cohort, their same class, and some of their same core teachers, but they move to a new city, to a very dorm-like setting, and they may have new professors, new projects, and even new community partners while they're there, and it's all facilitated through an online learning platform, like a very souped-up version of a personalized learning platform.
Dear potential Minerva student, I can imagine how you're feeling. Maybe excitement, maybe nerves, but most likely curiosity. That's what it's really like to be a Minerva student. My name is Liberty, and I'm a second-year student from London. When I got into Minerva, I was taking a gap year from academics. I soon realized that in a year of traveling and working around Europe and Asia, I learned more than I'd ever learned in school, whether it was from locals showing me real problems they'd faced or trying to learn to code on rainy days. The world felt bigger and more accessible to me than it had ever done before. So I packed up my stuff and gave up my place at traditional university and headed to San Francisco, not knowing what to expect, and I have never looked back. But before I go on, I want to say that Minerva isn't for everyone, and I encourage you to think seriously about whether it's right for you. There are sacrifices. You have to be prepared to engage actively with the city. It's definitely no campus bubble. You have to be prepared to see your family mainly through FaceTime. You have to be prepared to take on a demanding academic schedule, and you have to be prepared to move to a new city every semester. But if you're up for the challenge, you are in for an adventure. You'll be embraced into a community like no other. You'll join clubs, initiate your own projects. You'll make local friends and try local food. You'll learn from your mistakes. You'll plan your next assignment, your next trip, your next city. You'll find people who share your passions. And you'll try things you never thought you'd do before. You'll get lost, but along the way you'll find the most incredible lookout spot. If you choose Minerva, you are choosing the road less traveled. But if you crave an educational institution full of possibility and adventure, you are truly choosing the road for you.
Obviously, this is intended for prospective students to entice them to consider Minerva University, but I think it's great that she talks about the skills that those students are going to need. What will they need to navigate that very untethered college learning experience? So, now we're going to turn it over to you. We've shown you some of what's happening, some of the district's goals, some of what's out there in the world. And next, we get to mix it all together. We've got some worksheets over here. I'll help Sarah.
Okay, so this activity is called Headlines, and we've done this with various workshops, with our sustainability workshop and that. And the point of this activity is for you to look ahead and see what might happen in the future of education. And so the point is here at the top, you write your headline. What does 2029 look like in Batavia after we've gone through this process? And we see these amazing headlines. You can draw photos. You can put subheadings and subdescriptions down. But it's really an opportunity for you to tell us and envision and explore along the way. And I know my husband's got rock star graphic skills, so I want to see something great from you back there.
If you decide you want to do two, we have extras, so come over here.
What's making headlines in the news in 2029? Does everybody understand what we're doing?
So you should write a headline. She should write one. Her kids will still be in school.
Perfect. Oh dear.
I bet her time will be. My niece will be 14.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, they're trying to copy me into doing my own headline because I as well have children that will be coming up through the district, so I suppose. But we can't share my own.
Yep, Carrie lives yonder. Yonder.
And my kids will be going to J.D. Nelson's Princess in the back representing.
She's especially invested. Yep.
There it is.
Actually, written. Do you want to fill one of these out? No? You have to bring this to you. This is, of course, also imagining there will be newspapers that look like this. We need like a Instagram story from 2029 or something. I don't even know. Oh, yeah. You're Find that you're done with your headline. You want me to come grab it? Just hold it up.
I thought, can it be done if it's still empty?
Some people are not drawers.
That's
I made Carrie. Is this one of yours?
He wants to be a space farming astronaut, so I figured I'd need to speak with him.
Too, I just had no idea.
Yeah. How boring and lonely it would be flying in
I
space.
think I'd be fine with that. I didn't realize that means we wouldn't
It'll be autopilot by then.
Are you still working? It's okay if you are. You're not the only one.
all for sticking it out. We will collect your headlines. We're not going to make you share them all out, but we are going to collect them to see what the fun stories are, and we will combine those and share those out. What's next and how can you be more involved? So this graphic from the beginning of the presentation set the framework and showed you each of the phases to the master planning process. What we want to show you here is the tentative schedule, knowing that some of these phases, such as discover and explore, may take a little bit more time, if necessary, to really understand what's happening out there and have those discussions of where we want to be. But this is a general framework of where each of these phases and how long each of these phases might take until we can come to some sort of recommendation at the core team level and the administrative team leaders to what this master plan might look like to the Board of Education. The goal is to come in late spring, early summer to the board with these options and recommendations that stem from the plan. And what's down below is I want to draw your attention to, because we've got a small group here. I know we've got 26,000 Batavians that live here, so let's all do our part to get the word out to our neighbors, our friends, our colleagues that live here and want to have a say in what's happening in the district, so that they understand that, hey, when it comes to these latter phases, we're going to have opportunities to see what's going on in the district and what the core team is coming up with. And we're going to be able to provide input and have a say. And then the core team is going to go back and take our input and refine those options and concepts. And then they're going to come back to us and give us another opportunity to weigh in on things before it goes to the Board of Education. The point I'm trying to make here is let's get everyone out to be present and weigh in and provide that stakeholder input that we desire. As we go through this process, it's really important for us to get all voices and hear all voices and all backgrounds and all stories and have those included. And we've got a pretty diverse group of core team members with a number of different backgrounds and a number of different personal stories and experiences that really, I think, will be a great core team guiding this master planning process. But we got to be present in order to weigh in and let us know what's important to you and the challenges and opportunities you see and what you think should be addressed in this plan. So, questions and answers. We're gonna do it two ways, but what we would like is for you to get your device out again. We're gonna do a Menti, and this allows you to put in any question or comment that you might have. Some we might be able to address right now, some we might need to get back to you about.
If there is a question, if there's a hand-raising question,
a burning question,
we'll also answer that. This is a great way for us to capture and come back to anything, or for people to write things they might not want to get the answer to right now.
So I can just share?
Yeah.
Well, you're saying you want to hear from the community, that I think as with multiple issues we had in the district before, the communication of this event was poor. I didn't hear about it until 2 days ago, and the only reference I could find to it was almost like hidden in a Facebook post 2 weeks ago. It wasn't in the RMS communication that went out. So what is the communication plan? Are there other community open houses in this phase?
In this particular phase, there aren't any other community open houses planned, but there are a number of community open houses planned in the latter phases. In the first phase, we did two. So we did one here, and we did one at the admin center, and we staggered them on different evenings. For communication, we will need to work
for the community?
For the community, yep. And so for communication, we'll work with the communication team of the district to make sure that we're doing all platforms and sharing as much as possible. I know I did what I shared on some neighborhood next door websites to try and get the word out myself to 27 different neighborhoods. But you're right, we really need to get it out on all different platforms and different levels so people understand what's happening. And that's why it's important that you take what you find out here and what you explore and learn on the website to people that might not know what's going on, might not have kids in the district. Because if I'm honest, I mean, my children aren't in the district yet. I might not have known about it had I not been facilitated. So,
But I think by the
all
time you
important
get
things.
to the next open houses, you reach an anger level in the community like we had recently with curriculum changes and a lot of distrust of the administration. So I almost feel like,
hearing about it?
how did I hear about it? Someone messaged me and said, have you heard about this?
Okay, so word of mouth.
I did have a recommendation to you just because I wanted to educate myself before I came tonight, and I personally had a hard time finding it on the district website. I know that there was the open house post on the homepage, but it would be great if there was a link on the homepage to the full face.
Yeah, direct on the homepage you're talking about? Yeah, so if you go, for those who aren't aware where this, the website is for Building Our Future Together, if you go to the About on the district homepage, it has Building Our Future Together, and that links you then to a description and overview of the master planning process, each of the phases and what's supposed to happen in each of those phases. It also summarizes and provides video links and handout links from phase 1 if you missed those. So, thank you.
So we had a quick cost question, and I'll let Sarah field that because that's always a big one.
Yep, and how much it will cost and will it be a tax increase? We don't know yet. We're still in the early planning phases of visioning what could be out there. When we get to phase 4 and phase 5, when we start to put everything together with the core team, we will start running cost estimates at that point. And that's really critical when we bring it back to the community to get input and feedback where we're ending up. So we don't know yet. I think, that we're still so early on in the planning phases, we're not quite sure how that will turn out yet.
There were some questions, so I saw a couple go by that were about impacts of spaces that have already been built. Some of the spaces we've shown, somebody said in general the impact and the impact on attendance. So the particular high school that we showed, Agua Fria, they have actually set a series of goals around student participation and achievement and extracurricular activity, and in 1 year their school hit every single one of the goals they set for themselves, including attendance and involvement in extracurriculars. Those happen to be their goals, so Batavia's may be different, but we want to make sure we set a target and we can hit it. That's my research brain talking. Then there's the question about safety. So the schools that we showed, again, they handle this in different ways. At Jordan Middle School, they train children and they have features in the school in place to section off the building, and they want the kids to leave, and that is how they drill. They drill the kids about how to get out of the building safely and quickly, and they actually have a plan with their surrounding community that if a student should arrive at the person's house and say, there's a crisis at my school, the community knows they are to help that student be there. So we actually, in that case, empty the building. Other schools handle it differently. They compartmentalize the building. They have different systems in place, and all of that is a conversation to have with the district, the community, and local law enforcement to understand the right fit. But yes, with the glass walls, there are other measures, and again, usually they don't show up in photos, but there are other measures in place to help section off the school, slow down any crisis, and allow people to either shelter in place or leave the building depending on that school's safety plan. Without the app, how do kids with phones access the info? These are one-to-one districts, so the technology is provided by the district.
Will budget include long-term maintenance of new structures and furnishing? So that'll be a conversation we have, but I will tell you what we like to do with the district is look at life cycle costs. So not necessarily the initial upfront cost, but how much it's going to cost to maintain and service something we put in. So for instance, an air handler, when we look at options. So that will become part of the conversation as well as furniture and fixtures. So
Quick access and inclusion question. How do we reach non-native speakers to give their input? 2 ways. One is we often ask people in the district who speak the languages that are spoken in the district to help us translate materials. We also have people in DLR group who have helped us translate some of our most frequently used materials into our most frequently encountered languages. So some of our materials and even the surveys that we use to measure student and teacher engagement, we have in Spanish. We're working on actually getting them into Somalian and some other languages. We do it by district, and we either have somebody in the firm who can help us or someone in the community who can help us. I'm going to resume the scroll because I want to see more questions that are on here. Teacher setup time. It varies, but we would like it to be fast and fluid. Are you communicating with local law enforcement regarding safety or possible changes? That's always a part of the safety plan. The local law enforcement, fire department, any emergency response teams have to be involved in that conversation because they have to know what we're asking them to do.
And a point of clarification on that happens at the design level. So keep in mind, we're not designing anything. This is high level planning for the future, understanding what types of spaces are needed, how they might be arranged. Then that goes after the plan would be recommended and or adopted by the board. That would go into what's called an implementation phase, where the components of that master plan get designed and get constructed. And at that point is when we really start to engage police and fire and other professionals in the design of a particular space.
Thank you for the suggestion about getting the word out. I'm curious if there are any specific businesses that are best to get that information out at.
What are platforms that you all go to where finding out information would be posting information on that?
The email we get from the principal would be awesome.
The principal's in charge of what actually goes on the front page.
Maybe patch.
Patch, okay.
I mean, the
Not that
ways we're being communicated with already. I mean, it just wasn't in there. There was one Facebook post. A weekly newsletter from the principal. That could be something that includes a link to the district website with all the information.
I think there was one question on whether outdoor spaces will be considered at the same time. Yes, we will. So part of a comprehensive master plan is looking at the fields and looking at the stadium, etc. Make sure there's enough, including the parking lots and the traffic flow. That's a big thing.
Keep in mind it incorporates past studies. So we had an athletic facility study plan put in place, and some of that's already been done at the high school level. Just like the facility committee brought to us a series of projects which included site circulation and safety and security. So all of those are going to be wrapped in and folded into the discussion as we start talking about what might need to happen at your buildings.
Okay.
So on that graph with the arrows that you said was really boring, but I thought was fascinating. So when you got to those last two questions, what is the plan to understand? Because to me, it's sounding like kids don't like this communal learning environment, and they're not liking what's going on.
I mean, the most expedient way is to ask them what they meant.
So like who did that survey include?
So those were actually the students, the 5th through 12th grade students who participated in a full afternoon workshop with us. So we have that list of kids and we can ask them.
Like how many?
It was 30-ish. Yeah. It was a mix of principal advisory council, some club members, some younger students who've been identified that could kind of collaborate at that level.
So would those students most likely be in the high achieving areas?
I think that the students that were selected, they were selected from the principal's advisory group, if I'm not mistaken, which is a very diverse group of students. So the principals try to find students that are from all different pathways.
Is this like a 5-year plan? 10-year plan?
It's meant to be a 10-year plan that's a living document, so it sets out some goals and a target for the district, which, things change over 10 years. It's meant to kind of respond to that. But yeah, it is meant to cover a 10-year time period.
Well, I believe Harvard community. Unfortunately, my son is going to graduate high school this year, and my daughter's a freshman. My daughter's in a wheelchair, and so is there anything like a pending need, because although we got a great athletic field, we've got the worst stands probably I've ever seen, actually.
Probably not accessible.
Yeah, no, they're not accessible, so you have a dog pound and no one who has it needs to get. And I'm a family, this is a family, but Katie's a family, so we suffer in silence. But it's not until you see other people that go, wow, yeah, those things bouncing on the feet are,
And actually, there are projects that are identified that the district puts together, capital projects.
yeah, like that seems like,
So there are projects just as the bleachers that haven't been identified as being on the capital projects list. The one thing the district is being cognizant of is, as Tony mentioned, how to plan for certain projects to make sure that we're planning smartly and not throwing good money after bad, but that is definitely a thought. I can tell you that after meeting with the facility committee this morning. So
We do also have a parent on the core team who has a child with an immobility device, and she's a really important voice for making sure that we're practicing universal design, so that when we talk about this plan, we have that perspective on accessibility.
well, it's like she's got, one of her heroes is Tatiana McFadden. Tatiana McFadden is like the fastest woman in the world, the best athlete. So she's a wheelchair racer. And so my daughter, of course, doesn't want to do it around here so no one sees her, so she practiced here at Geneva High School. And I'm like, oh, look at this. It's all these ramps everywhere. And so until you see other things, you're like, wow.
I had a question about, so the phase 5, the recommendations that you will provide to the district, will those be like, will you guys be giving a recommendations for priority as far as the results that you and research that you put together? So then the district would then pick from those lists of priorities for the
So good question, and one tiny point of clarification, because I want to make sure everybody understands that the options and recommendations to the Board of Education will be done by the core team and the administrative leadership group. We as DLR group are facilitating, so we will not be presenting anything. This is Batavia's plan. This is coming and being built by Batavia, so it will be members of Batavia, even though I am one, that will be presenting that. But yes, as part of that, typically what comes out of these are phased approaches or prioritized approaches, if you will, of what should we tackle first and what might be those really nice things to have as also a part of the plan process. But the core team will, part of their process will be to identify and help prioritize that and get feedback from the community on, hey, are these prioritized, how we're prioritizing, is this right? So, yes, that's part of it.
We realize it is 8:38, and we promised you we'd end at 8:30. If you have more questions, come on up. We'll be here in Putnam. Throw them into Mentimeter. We will make sure that we go through these so we can provide answers, even if we aren't able to address every one of them tonight, and get them back out maybe in the newsletter. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.